Peter, thank you for being here. Okay, now we are moving on to the National Science Foundation with Dr. Peter Atherton. He is an SBIR program director at NSF. Today, he's going to be talking about the NSF specific process, including more information on the infamous project pitch. More about Dr. Atherton. He has a broad background in the physical sciences and extensive experience in technology development and commercialization. He holds a doctorate in physics and quantum optics and a Bachelor of Engineering from the University of Queensland in Australia. Thank you for being here, Peter.
Thank you, Kara. I appreciate that. I don't know why the project pitch is referred to as infamous, but I guess I'll find out during the course of the event. I'm not sure. Okay, so thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. And as you know, what I'm going to talk about is NSF's SBIR STTR program. This is otherwise known or has been rebranded recently as America's Seed Fund, powered by the National Science Foundation, but it's really still referred to basically as the NSF SBIR STTR program. Okay, so before I get into the program itself, I wanted to just give a little bit of background about NSF, because a lot of people, I think, don't have a clear understanding of what NSF is or what NSF does. So just a couple of slides here. So NSF is a relatively small federal agency that funds research across all areas of science and engineering. So NSF generally is broken down into directorates, which are typically named in accordance with the technical discipline that they most prevalently address. So, for example, we have a biological sciences directorate, we have an engineering directorate, math and physical sciences directorate, and so on. So that's kind of the way NSF is structured. And this next slide just shows some stats regarding NSF. It's just to give you a picture, a flavor of what NSF looks like. So in 2022, NSF's total budget was $8.8 billion. I think in 23, it was just under $10 billion. So, it's not a huge federal agency. Of that money, each year, roughly 93% goes straight back out the door to fund research, education, and related activities. In 2021, NSF received 43,600 proposals, of which 11,300 were awarded. In that same year, NSF spent roughly $1.5 billion on STEM education. And in its history, NSF has funded 253 people who've gone on to be Nobel Prize winners. That's a stat that NSF, I think, is very proud of. So this just kind of gives you a feel for the type of agency that NSF is. Now, one thing I do want to highlight is that in early 2022, for the first time in 31 years, NSF formed a new directorate, in addition to the ones that I showed you on the earlier slide, and they're shown on the background here. And this new directorate is called the Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. And to put it succinctly, the aim of the TIP Directorate is to stimulate the translation of research and innovation outcomes into societal benefits, societal impact. And of course, that can be done in many different ways. But one of the ways that can be done is by funding startup high-tech companies or small high-tech companies to develop new impactful innovations. And so that of course, is what the SBIR STTR program is all about. And I'll just refer to it as the SBIR program. You can assume that I'm also referring to STTR as well. But that's what the SBIR program is, at least at NSF, is all about. And so the SBIR program and a couple of other innovation-focused programs, which were previously housed in the engineering directorate at NSF, got moved into the TIP Directorate. So we are now part of the TIP Directorate. And TIP is doing a lot of other things, new things as well, some of which are really very new for NSF. Okay, so that's all a detour. So now back to the SBIR program at NSF. So one thing I do want to stress is that the NSF SBIR program, and by the way, SBIR was born at NSF in the 1970s, so this is where it originated. But it's different from all the other SBIR, STTR programs that you'll see across the federal government. And I think most people, when they hear about SBIR, they hear about the larger programs like the DoD program. This program, our program, is very different from that. And so if there's one thing I want you to come away with today, it's a sense of how the program is different. We look at what we do differently, what we actually fund is different, and so on. So the aim of this program is to fund the development of new high technical risk technology innovations with the aim of generating commercial and societal impact. So this is a grant-based program. We are not funding companies so that we can buy things from our companies or they can supply them back to NSF. We don't buy anything from our companies. The ultimate objective of all of the funding of the SBIR STTR program is to generate societal impact through the development of new technologies that will address societally important problems. Might be a medical problem, might be a problem in the computational sciences, might be a biomedical technology that can address important problems. Our funding goes towards research and development, and there are some small carve-outs there, but basically it goes towards research and development. And the aim of the funding, particularly in the early stages of a company's time with us at NSF, the aim of the funding is to help the company to de-risk the technology for later commercial success. So we are prepared to take a chance on new and innovative technologies as long as they look credible. So we're prepared to take a chance. Our sweet spot, in fact, is, as I've been saying, is to fund high technical risk innovations. So we're looking for new technologies that will push the envelope in the same way that the rest of NSF funds scientific research, which is pushing the scientific boundaries. So we want technologies that will push the technology boundaries and will also potentially lead to societal benefits. So each year, the program awards over $200 million in research and development funding to startup companies and small businesses. And what that means for an individual company is that if you go all the way through the program, and I'll explain what that means shortly, the company can receive up to around $2 million in non-dilutive funding, in other words, equity-free funding. One of the important things to appreciate about the program is that it's basically technology agnostic. So we don't have particular areas of technical focus. We're not looking for solutions to a specific problem here or there. We're looking for proposals right across the technology spectrum that basically meet our review criteria, which is new high technical risk innovation, the potential to be at least commercially viable, and the potential for positive societal impact. That's, in a nutshell, that's our review criteria. So this slide shows, for the financial year 2020, this slide shows a breakdown of funding for this particular year in broad categories. These categories don't correspond to our topics, and I'll come back to that in a few slides, but this is just a breakdown to show you roughly where the money went. And you can see it's right across the spectrum: life sciences, IT, chemistry and the environment, electronics, IoT and robotics, materials and manufacturing, photonics and semiconductors. And then we have an other topics topic, not a real topic, I guess, but it's a place to house the proposals that didn't readily fit into any of our current topics. So key takeaway here is the program is basically technology agnostic. So the wrong question to ask us is, are you interested in funding this type of technology? That's the wrong question to ask us. The right question to ask yourselves is, does my proposal, or what I'm thinking of as a proposal, is it likely to meet the review criteria for the NSF SBIR program? That's the right question to ask. Okay, so this slide, I've mentioned a couple of times that we are really focused on funding very early stage companies and high-risk innovations. This slide and the next two slides really emphasize the point that we are interested, our sweet spot is to fund companies at a very early stage. And just in case you're wondering why that is, the reason that we like to fund companies at an early stage is because that's where, this is public money and we want the money to make maximum impact. And so the maximum difference that we can make is to companies that are at such an early stage that they probably can't attract money from the private sector on good commercial terms. Okay, so we are often the first significant money into the companies that we fund. So these are just some stats for the financial year 2020. So in this particular year, more than half of all phase one proposals that were awarded, and I'll come back to what phase one means in a second, more than half of all the phase one proposals that were awarded were from first-time applicants. In other words, companies that had never submitted a proposal to NSF before. So the fact that you've never submitted to the government, never submitted to NSF, that is not a disadvantage when it comes to submitting to our program. In the same year, financial year, 95% of phase one awards were to startups who had fewer than 10 employees. And in many cases, at the start of their phase one project, they had just 1 or 2 employees. So again, we are not put off by the fact that a company is small. And this next slide, so 81% of phase one awards in the same financial year went to startups that were established in the previous 5 years. And I can tell you in the topics that I manage, which includes AI, quantum, high-performance computing, cybersecurity, I can tell you a lot of the companies are formed in the previous few months. In fact, many times they're formed purely and simply so that they can qualify to apply for the program. So again, key message is our sweet spot is to fund small, early-stage companies with a good idea, with a high technical risk innovation that has the potential to be societally impactful. Some more numbers regarding the program. So in the period 2016 to 2020, we made over 2,200 awards to startups and small businesses. Now we try to measure the success of the program. It's a very difficult thing to do because most of the companies, nearly all the companies that go on to be very societally impactful, of course, we can't track that. That's well beyond our program, and we can't really track them mostly. We try to, but many times you can't get good information about them. So we end up tracking what it's the same mistake that most people make. We end up, measuring according to the information that we can actually obtain. And so we track things like, funding and acquisitions and mergers and so forth. So in the period 2016 to 2022, we know that over $20 billion in private investments have been made into our companies during this period. We also are aware of over 300 company exits during the same period. This is most commonly via acquisition, sometimes via mergers, and less commonly via IPOs. But there's certainly a small percentage that go on to do an IPO. So I think, by any reasonable measure, the program is very successful. And one thing to keep in mind is that the program directors in this program, this is all we do. This is all we do. And most of us are former entrepreneurs. I mean, I'm a former entrepreneur. Most of us are former entrepreneurs. So we do understand the pains that startup companies have to go through. And, as much as we can, we try to make the program, we're part of the government, so we have to be government-ish in some ways, but we try to make the program as flexible as possible, understanding that things, when you're in a startup company, things are everything is inherently uncertain. And so, we try to make accommodations for those uncertainties as much as possible. You might, for example, have to pivot because you come to understand that the market is not where you thought it was. And so, in principle, we are very pivot friendly, just as an example. Okay, so how does the program work? So we have 2 phases of funding in this program. If you look across the federal government at the other SBIR programs, you'll find that a number of them have 3 phases of funding. We have 2 phases of funding. We don't have a funded phase 3. We also do not offer a direct to phase 2 option. So all companies must enter the program through phase 1. And so there's the infamous project pitch comes before the phase 1, and I'll come on to that shortly. But the first actual funded phase is phase 1. And the purpose of a phase 1 project is to establish technical feasibility of the innovation that the company is proposing to develop and commercialize. That's the key objective. A phase 1 project is nominally for between 6 and 12 months, and the company can select a duration anywhere in that range. And maximum funding at the moment is $275,000. This generally goes up over time, of course, but at the moment it's $275,000. Companies that complete phase 1 can go on to apply for a phase 2 award. And of course, the phase 2 is a continuation of the phase 1 work. So it's basically the same technology. Sometimes there are pivots between phase 1 and phase 2, but it's basically the same technology. But it's more, because it's been a little bit de-risked in phase 1, the phase 2 work is more towards the D end of the R&D spectrum. So you might be aiming at developing prototypes or undertaking pilot programs with potential customers and so forth. So the sort of default duration for a phase 2 project is 24 months, and maximum base funding at the moment is $1 million. Now, I mean, a phase 2, like a phase 1, a phase 2 project can be extended if you're in phase 2 and you need more time. You can apply for a no-cost extension, which is a very simple process, and we almost never decline no-cost extensions. And if you are awarded a 2-year phase 2, but it turns out you can go faster than that, without wasting the money, then the program director will almost certainly allow you to accelerate the program. So I've had plenty of, I shouldn't say plenty, I've had a number of phase 2 projects accelerated down to either 18 months or even a few accelerated down to 12 months. It really depends on the nature of the project, but we're very flexible about that too. Now, companies that receive a phase 2 award can apply for any of a number of supplements. And there's a long list of potential supplements, which I won't go through now, but you can find them all on our website. The largest of these supplements is what we call our phase 2B supplement. And this is basically a 50 cent in the dollar match of any third-party investments and or any sales revenue, both of which have to be the consequence of a consequence of the R&D that we have funded since the start of phase 1. Okay, so for example, if you're in phase 2 and you receive investment funding of, let's say, $2 million, then you would qualify for the maximum phase 2B match, which is $500,000. So if you receive anything over $1 million in third-party investments during the period after the start of your phase 1 award, you in principle should qualify for the maximum phase 2B award of $500,000. Similarly, if you make sales of product which is a consequence of the R&D that we have funded, same thing applies. And it can be a mix of investments and or sales. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be either. And so if you take the phase 2B, and we have a number of other supplements available at phase 2, as I said earlier on, if you go through phase 1, phase 2, take advantage of all the major supplements, you'll leave the program having received about $2 million in non-dilutive funding. So if you want, our website is a treasure trove of good information about the program. And this is a screenshot. This slide is a screenshot from the web page, which is linked at the top of the slide here. So the website will actually walk you through, amongst many other things, it will actually walk you through the process from first contact with the program all the way through to submitting your proposal, which is then reviewed and a final decision is made. So if you want to find out more about this, please go to the link at the top of this slide, and I'll shoot the slides over after the session today. Now,
Peter, quick question.
Of course.
Are the submissions confidential, or are they ever made public?
They're never made public. Yeah. Proposals and pitches are retained by NSF as proprietary information. They're never made public. We're often asked for examples of successful proposals, and we don't release them because they're proprietary, but we actually also wouldn't release them anyway, because as soon as we release a successful one, every other proposal would look just like that. And that's not what we want. This is an important point. We don't want formulaic proposals. We would like to fund companies that are passionate about what they're doing. I mean, you're passionate about achieving some societal impacts, generating some societal benefit. And so we don't want a formulaic proposal. You should write it according to the guidelines in the solicitation and to a lesser extent on the website. you should use those guidelines in preparing your proposal, but we want to know what you feel. So if we were to release a pitch, a successful pitch or a successful proposal, they'd all look the same. And we don't want that. And that's another reason why we don't really encourage the use of proposal writers, because they will sanitize your thoughts. And we just want to know what you're thinking. We don't want to know what's going on inside you that is driving you to want to do this. Okay, so just moving on. So what do we look for when we evaluate proposals that we receive? And if you want to see the formal review criteria, you can go to our website and see the formal review criteria. But essentially, this is what it comes down to. First of all, what will be the impact of your technology if you are able to develop it successfully from a technology point of view and deploy it? What will be the impact? And as I said, that's the ultimate objective of all our funding, to generate positive societal impact or national benefits. Next, what is the new technology innovation upon which your project is going to be based? Now, we require this because we're part of NSF. It's a bias we have because we're part of NSF. So the rest of NSF funds leading edge scientific research. We fund the technological equivalent just because we're part of NSF. We want projects that will push the technological boundaries. Now, that's not to say that every successful company must be based on a new high-risk technology innovation. That's not true. But it is what you need to have in your proposal for it to be successful in this program. We also look for some evidence of market pull. You know, what's the need that you're looking to address? And if you can do this before phase one, it's good. If you have, what I'm about to say, if you can do some even rudimentary customer discovery and put some evidence based on that in your proposal to suggest that there actually is a market need for this, that's good. It's not a requirement, and most phase one proposals don't have it. It's much more important at phase two because we expect phase two proposals to be more commercially mature. But if you can do it at phase one, it will help you, that's for sure. And the other thing we look for, because these are high-tech innovations that we're looking to fund, we look for commercial scalability. It's a characteristic mostly of high-tech innovations, a common characteristic of high-tech innovations, that they are commercially scalable. In other words, the marginal costs go down as volumes go up. Versus the other end of the spectrum is a consulting company where the costs scale according to the revenues. That's not what we're looking to fund. We're looking to fund scalable technologies because that's the kind of technology, that's usually how new high-tech innovations turn out anyway, but that's the kind of technology which is likely to have greatest societal impact. Okay, so what eligibility requirements do you have to meet? And I've got just a synopsis here, but if you want more information, please read the solicitation. I mean, frankly, that's good advice anyway. I think a lot of people submit proposals without ever reading the solicitation, and you should. It's not, it's not entertaining reading, but it's really important reading. So eligibility criteria. Company should have less than 500 employees. As you can see from what I've already said, our companies, always meet that requirement. The company must be majority owned by US citizens or permanent residents, and there are some subtleties here. So if you go to the eligibility criteria, there's a link, an SBA link for this, Small Business Administration link for this. You can see all the subtleties to that, but it basically boils down to what I just said. The work must be done within the United States, so you can't contract out some researchers in other parts of the world. It must be done in the United States. And the principal investigator, this is the PI, so-called PI, this is someone who has a particular status, sort of the lead investigator on the project, must be primarily employed by the small business during the period of the award. That means more than 20 hours a week. And it also, if you look at the solicitation, it means less than 19.6 hours a week in the aggregate employed in other positions, and must also dedicate at least one person month per 6 project months to the project that we are funding. Okay, so must be primarily employed by the company, must dedicate at least one person month per 6 project months to the funded project. So the PI might be spending, for example, 2 person months on a 6-month project, and but might be fully employed by the company and may be spending the other 4 months doing things which are not being supported by the award. Those other things could be, for example, commercial activities associated with growing the business. Because, as I said, we only fund research and development. We don't fund sales and marketing activities and so on. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the eligibility criteria. But again, please go to the solicitation for more details. I'm going to come back to this point about the program being basically technology agnostic. If you go to the link at the top of this slide, this is one of the pages on our website. This link is, and you will see this table on the right. This is the half of the slide on the right is a screenshot from this page. And these are all the topics that we have at the moment. Okay, so we do break the program down into topics. The reason we do that, to be honest with you, largely is so that proposals come in somewhat pre-sorted. Although even when we receive them, we go through them. And sometimes if we think a proposal has been submitted to topic A, but we think it would receive a better review or more appropriate review in topic B, we will just move it after the fact. So you don't have to stress too much about picking the right topic or subtopic. If you click on any of these squares on our website, it will take you to a list of subtopics for that topic. So the idea is to try and pick the topic and subtopic, which are the best reflection of the technical area of your innovation. But don't worry too much about that. Your proposal won't be returned because we think you've selected the wrong topic and subtopic. We'll just move it. It's no big deal. So again, we're looking for startups that are doing innovative research and development, with the potential to be at least commercially viable, and more importantly, or most importantly, the potential to generate positive societal impact. As I've said, we don't require a specific fit with a topic. Just pick the best topic and subtopic that you can. These topics are not meant to be exclusive. So if you look inside a particular topic, you'll see some subtopics. If you don't see your particular, subdiscipline in there, the subdiscipline that's the subject of your proposal, don't worry about it. I mean, the lists of subtopics are just meant to be examples. So we're trying to be inclusive, not exclusive. That's a really important point. We often get a question about, should I submit to this subtopic or that topic? You just pick the one that you think is best, and you won't be declined because you picked the wrong topic or subtopic. Now, I said we are technology agnostic. That's almost true. The only two things that we don't fund are clinical trials. The National Institutes of Health will fund clinical trials. We don't. And we do not fund any work on or associated with Schedule I controlled substances for other reasons. Okay, now the infamous project pitch. Okay, I don't know what I should say about this now, but so the project pitch was introduced a few years ago, and the aim was to provide quick feedback to potential proposers about whether their idea appeared to be a good fit with the program. The reason we did it was because prior to that, and it would still be the case now if we didn't have the pitch, prior to that, we were receiving so many proposals that had no technical innovation at all. They're just not. I'm not saying that they're not a good basis for a good business. They could have been, but they're just not a fit with the program. And so back in those days, once we received the proposal, we have to put it through the whole paneling and review process. And, that's 4 to 6 months to get a no back to the company, when as soon as we open the proposal and look at it, we know that it's not a fit. And that seemed unfair to everybody, particularly to the proposers. Obviously the best answer is a yes. The second best answer is a quick no. And so that's what the project pitch is all about. It's trying to get, yes, it looks okay, please go ahead, or no, it doesn't look like a fit. So, and then you can do some other things. And I'll come back to that in a second. So what does a project pitch consist of? First of all, I want to emphasize the review of a project pitch is not a pre-review of your proposal. I mean, we don't have enough information to pre-review your proposal, and we are not when we look at these pitches, we are not the review panel. So we're not looking to pre-review your proposal. We're looking to see whether it appears that your project is a good fit with the program. And so we look for brief information in these 4 areas. What is the technological innovation? what are the technical objectives and the challenges? What is the market opportunity that you see? And what does the company and team look like? So, and I think these are 500 words for the first, 500, maximum 500 words for the second, and maximum 250 for the market opportunity and the company and the team. So, you know, all up, it's like a page and a half of text if you just did it in text. Now people often ask, can I submit images or can I submit diagrams? You can try, but it's intended to be a text-based process. And so oftentimes we will see that there had been an image there, but it's been stripped out. So sometimes the images or the diagrams make it through. Oftentimes they don't. So if you do try to include anything other than text, just keep in mind that it may not make it through. We may not see it. So it's important to say in the text what you want to say overall. Okay, so further things about the project pitch. So you can submit a pitch at any time, even if we don't have sometimes we have brief periods where there's no open solicitation, you can still submit a project pitch. There are some limitations. You can only have one project pitch under review at a time. And you can only also submit one pitch per submission window. So if you submit and the submission window refers to the fact that our solicitations are broken. If you look at right at the top of a solicitation, you'll see a 1-year solicitation is broken down into submission windows. And typically now we have 3 windows per year, so each window is about 4 months long. And the reason we have windows is because it drives the submissions, to come in at the end of the window. They're not deadlines, but invariably the proposing community sees them as deadlines. And so when we have these submission windows, the end of a submission window is when we receive all the proposals. So we were hopeful when we first introduced the pitch of being able to review proposals on a continuous basis, but they just don't come in continuously. So we end up reviewing them in batch mode, and almost all the proposals for a particular submission window come in the few days before the end of the window. Okay, so you can submit one project pitch per submission window. So if you submit a pitch during a window, you might get, let's say you get a declination or an uninvitation, more correctly, then you can't you want to revise and resubmit the pitch. You can't do it during the same submission window. You can do it during the next window or later, of course, but you can't do it during the same submission window. If you do, it'll just be bounced out again on the basis that you've exceeded the number of submissions. Now, on the other hand, if you submit a pitch and you receive an invitation to submit a proposal, and you submit a phase 1 proposal, then you can't submit another pitch until the outcome of that proposal submission has been made available to you. So either an award or a declination of the actual proposal itself, which is some months later. Okay, so once a project pitch goes in, you've got to wait for its fate to be made known to you before you can submit another pitch, and you can't submit another pitch in the same submission window. So I hope that's clear. Now, the processing time for pitches is around a month. In other words, from the time you submit to the time you get feedback is typically around a month. It does vary a little bit. I mean, so for example, in the AI topic, which I co-manage with one of my colleagues, we have huge numbers of pitches. I mean, it's just amazingly high number of pitches. So sometimes we go over a month, but we try and keep it under a month. Anyway, so if you want to submit your pitch, you go to the link at the bottom of this page. It's also very easy to find on our website. So what happens after you submit your project pitch? I've kind of talked about this a little bit. So you submit your pitch, it's reviewed by a program director. If it looks as though there's an innovation there, and you meet the other, you've got a reasonable idea of what challenges you want to overcome, and you've got some idea of what the market is, and you've got a team in mind that looks credible, then you'll be invited to submit a full phase 1 proposal. So that's the best outcome. If the Cognizant Program Director reviews your pitch and determines that the project doesn't seem to be a good fit with the program, you'll receive an uninvitation with some guidance about why your pitch was not invited. And then you can make a decision on whether you think whether you've concluded that your project is really not a fit with the program at all, and then you can look for funding elsewhere, Or if you think that maybe you just, you didn't write the pitch that you should have written, then you can redraft it and resubmit the pitch in the next submission window. Now, so I want to, this is not in the slides, but I want to say something that's really important, because we get a lot of feedback about uninvited pitches, and I understand this. I'm not criticizing anyone. People are sometimes upset about their pitch not being invited. And, we use language which we think is clear in explaining why a pitch hasn't been invited. But I can tell you in the topics that I manage, and I think in most of the other topics, the most common reason by far, is that when we look through it, we don't see any evidence that there's a new, leading edge technology innovation involved. And so the most common thing that I see in the pitches that I don't invite is there's a little bit of discussion about the background to this. This is in the technology description section. There's a bit of discussion about the background. And then there's a long discussion about what the features of the product or the technology will be once it's developed, and then a statement about why it fits our mandate. So nowhere in this sort of prototypical example, nowhere has it discussed what is the new technical innovation that you're actually going to develop. And if you don't have a new innovation to develop as a small company, you're probably not going to be able to build a sustainable competitive advantage, and therefore you will probably fail. So you've got to tell us what is, never mind all the other stuff, tell us what is the key technical insight or the key technical innovation on which you think you can build a company. And then go on in the next section to describe, how you'll deal with some of the technical challenges associated with that. But I can't overemphasize this. This is the most common failure mode. People just don't tell us what the technical innovation is. We get everything else. We get what it's going to do when it's finished, how great it's going to be, et cetera, et cetera. That's wonderful, but it doesn't tell us what we need to know. You need to tell us what is the innovation itself that will set you apart from other people that are out there and will be your competitors. So I just want to make that point very strongly, because I understand why people are sometimes a bit upset when their pitch is declined. Almost always that's the actual reason. So, if you address that up front, you've got a much better chance of being invited the first time.
Peter, a question.
Yes, Karen.
I'm dovetailing on something that Allison wrote in the chat. And
I'm sorry, I'm not watching the chat. Sorry.
I know, that's fine. The ultimate question, though, is how much of what could be considered intellectual property should they reveal in the pitch?
Yeah. Well, you don't have much space, so you can't reveal that much. But it's not, it's not at all impossible to tell us what it is that's unique and special, and what's the new insight that you're trying to leverage to build a new technology. That's not difficult to do. You don't have to tell us, and you can't tell us in the space you've got. You can't tell us everything, but you need to give us enough so that when someone who's reasonably knowledgeable in the field looks at it, they can say, "Oh, okay, I get it. This is new and different. Okay, may work, may not work. We don't know. This isn't a proposal. We're not reviewing the proposal at this point. But this absolutely, this is worth giving a shot. So I'll invite it." So, to be honest with you, when we first launched the pitch, I was in favor of limiting that section to like 100 words, and that would emphasize the point that you can't. We just want to know some key nuggets. You tell us why what you've got is something special. And we don't get that. We just don't get that. Mostly we get, regurgitation of what is commonly known about the needs in the marketplace. And then, as I said, a description of the features of the technology after it's developed. But, tell me, okay, how are you going to get there? How are you going to make those features possible? What are the key insights that will allow you to do this where other people aren't doing it at the moment? So we just need to know enough to be able to make that determination. And, if you write it and then read it back to yourself from our point of view, you'll probably be able to tell very easily whether this would meet that requirement.
Thank you.
I hope that's helpful. I'm stressing this because it's a major pain point, I think, because we get so many pitches that fall into the other category that I just described. And I don't like uninviting things. I like to see new ideas. I like to invite them, and it's great when we can actually award them. So it's always disappointing to look at something and say, okay, if you could do this, it'd be great, but you haven't told me how you're going, haven't even given me a clue as to how you're going to do it. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. I'm finished. So if you want to know more about the program and sort of keep up with what's happening, you are welcome to join our email list. And if you go to our homepage here, seedfund.nsf.gov, right at the bottom of the page, you'll see this this block on the right, and you can join our email list, and then you'll get all the news that we have from time to time. So please feel free to do that. Any of you, also I should mention, any of you who are not going to be submitting a proposal in the short term and feel that you'd be qualified to act as reviewers and have an interest in acting as reviewers, please feel free to email the program at this email address here, sbir@nsf.gov, and send your CV or resume and express an interest in reviewing for the program. And that helps us because we're always looking to expand our pool of reviewers. And as long as you're not in the process of, as long as you haven't submitted a pitch and you're not on the verge of submitting a pitch and you don't have a pitch or a proposal submitted, if you did, you would be conflicted. But as long as that's not the case, then if you want to review, you could review. And that will also help you. It helps us because more reviewers. It would help you because you see the program from the inside. And in fact, oftentimes people who receive phase 1 awards will volunteer to review on phase 2 panels, and they're not conflicted if it's different phases, because they get to see how phase 2 reviewers, particularly the commercial reviewers at phase 2, actually look at these proposals. So keep that in mind as well. If anyone's interested, just send you an email into that email address and send your CV or resume or whatever, and we can put you in our database. So with that, I'll stop talking, and I'm happy to take questions. Are we having questions just via the chat, or is there any audio?
I'll ask you the questions.
Okay.
David is wanting to know if he can be a reviewer if he has received an active grant.
If you have a grant if you have a phase 1 award, for example, that's fine. As long as you don't have a proposal under review or a pitch under review, it's fine. So if you're a phase 1 recipient, for example, you can even review for phase 1, and you can certainly review for phase 2 as long as you don't have your phase 2 proposal submitted.
Okay, I have another question about the timing. If someone is submitting a pitch, and that's during a window for application, are they expected to get that back and then apply right away? Like, how much time do they have?
No. So when you receive an invitation, you will have 12 months from the date of the invitation to submit your proposal. So that'll go over into the next solicitation if necessary. So for example, our current solicitation has its last submission window on November 1st. We will have another solicitation coming out not too long after that. So let's suppose you receive. So today is Friday the 13th, which I just realized is a very inauspicious day. But so let's suppose you received an invitation today, October the 13th. You would have until October the 13th, 2024 to submit your proposal. Now, just to clarify that too, because I get this question a lot, that doesn't mean that you would have to the end of the submission window that October 13th, 2024 falls in the middle of. You have to that date, to October 13th, 2024. So you have to submit by that date. It's not the end of that submission window. But you can submit any time during that 12 months. One thing I will mention, we get a surprising number of, so at the end of this 12 months, we get a surprising number of people who write and request an extension to their invitation. We don't grant extensions to the invitation. I mean, 12 months is a long time, especially in fast-moving tech spaces. So we expect you to use the invitation in that 12 months. It's a use once thing. We expect you to use it in that 12 months or it will just expire. And then you have to submit another pitch. And here's another tip. If you do that and you submit another pitch after your previous pitches expired, after you've had 12 months to submit your proposal but didn't, I strongly urge you not to resubmit the same pitch. Okay, because a pitch that looked relevant, let's say in the AI topic, it's very fast moving, a pitch that looked relevant a year ago may not look so strong today. Okay, so make sure you don't just resubmit thinking, well, I got an invitation before, I'll get another one. You may not. And so always go to the trouble of updating your pitch, make sure it's current, make sure you're thinking about your project is current, and then, revise and resubmit.
That makes sense. What if your innovation is taking a technology that exists, but applying it in a new way or to solve a new problem?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So our sweet spot is to fund new technical innovations. Now, sometimes, to be honest with you, the number of really fundamentally different, groundbreaking new technologies that come along in a year is pretty low. In any field, it's pretty low. And so we do fund, we do sometimes fund what I call application innovations. So it's taking existing methods and applying it to a new application. But there still needs to be some unique technical challenge about applying the technology in the application that you're thinking of. If it's just, taking an off-the-shelf technology and applying it as is in some different use case, reviewers will absolutely not rate that highly. I've seen that time and time and time again. But if you're looking to take a technology that's been developed for a certain field, certain type of use case, and apply it to a very different field in a creative way to a different field, where you really do have to overcome some new challenges to get it to work or to be applicable in that field, then that can be very fundable. And some of those projects are also very impactful. And in fact, I would argue that many of the AI projects that we fund are variations on that. Because how often do you have, a sort of new deep learning type innovation come along? It doesn't happen very often. So we do fund application innovations, but there still has to be some real technical challenges associated with making the technology work in that new application space.
And there is a question that deals with AI, and the person is asking for you to speak about innovation in AI, for example. Can you use technology in a new way, i.e. use XGBoost paired with embeddings versus a step change in technology like large language models?
Yeah, it's just really the same answer. So as long as it's not a very routine application, so for example, if you just take a combination of two approaches, and I'm not commenting on the particular approach that was just mentioned, but if you take a sort of standard combination of two approaches, and it's obvious it would work, they would work together, there's nothing innovative about it, it probably won't be very well reviewed. But if you take existing approaches and you're using them in a way which A, meets a new requirement, and B, requires you to solve some technological challenges to make them work effectively, efficiently, safely, with privacy concerns addressed and so forth, then that can be a fit with the program, certainly.
Hello, Peter. I have a question. My pitch has a lot to do. Nobody understands what I'm pitching as it is. Less than 0.1% of the global population understands stenography at all.
Oh, okay.
So when I'm trying to couple stenography to teach coding at a much advanced level, are the reviewers going to even take a chance to review because they don't understand stenography? And a lot of people want to discard it because they just don't understand what I do.
Yeah. Well, so two comments.
Challenge.
Yeah, sure. No, I get it. I get it. So two comments I would make. First of all, we do our best to select reviewers who actually do. All of us read I'm talking about program directors now. All of us read the proposals before the panels because we have to select reviewers for the panels. So we do the best we can to find reviewers with expertise that's relevant to the proposals that are being reviewed. So, for example, in your case, and we've got plenty of search tools to find reviewers. I would look for at least one specialist reviewer that can, that understands the intricacies of what you are proposing. That's the first thing. Second thing is, if you have rightly identified a challenge for you in getting people to appreciate the value of your, of your innovation. So it's also important to you to make sure that it is as intelligible as possible and you don't have to make it intelligible to every person on the planet, but intelligible as possible to people who are working in that general field. You know what I mean? So it's partly the writing of the proposal. Make sure you write it in such a way that it's understandable. And it's partly on us to get reviewers that understand the proposals that are submitted. We shouldn't be having proposals reviewed by people, none of whom have any idea what the technology is about. That would be, that would be on us. The fault would be on our side if we did that. So I think there are two parts to the answer to that question. I hope that's helpful.
Peter, thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's my pleasure. If anyone has any further questions, please feel free to reach out to this address, sbir@nsf.gov, or you can email me directly too. That's absolutely fine.